Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Frame Found podcast. I am your host, Chris Tinsley, and for this episode, we are talking about the blame game. So, the reason why I chose the title of Effect and Cause for this episode is calling back to an old song by the band The White Stripes. I feel like I dated myself again with that. Um, it's a song, and there's like lyrics in it that I just found to be kind of comical. But there's one like lyric in there that goes something like, "I ain't the reason that you gave me no reason to return your call." And then another one is, "You like burnt my house down, then got mad at my reaction." And so I don't know, when thinking about kind of, the backlog of ideas that I have uh, for this podcast, I just felt like I thought this was an interesting one to kind of bring up because it's something that shows up in life all the time. I think I think that there's a tendency for when the chips are down. I think that there's a tendency for people to kind of rewrite the story in a way that suits themselves the best. I think that we're all like guilty of it, um, you know, at some point or another. And I think it's a very interesting concept because it shows up everywhere, and it's one of the easiest things to default to. I think, the blame game can go round and round for pretty much ever, right? Some people can say, the reason why they did or didn't like do something was because this person had done or not done something, right? And then it just flips and it flops, and it basically just becomes a volley that's endless. So I just wanted to create an episode that kind of, zooms in on this topic a little bit more, and to kind of talk about some of the frameworks that one could use to navigate a situation like that. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. What does it feel like when somebody suddenly shifts a story in such a way that you become the one to blame? I think it happens all the time, and I think the default reaction is a little bit of confusion. It could be frustration. It could be anger. The person could immediately take a defensive like position, and this happens a lot in ambiguous environments. That like just whether it's in like a professional sense within like a department or cross-functional like relationships. It could also be like household. It could be like your family or friends, right? It could literally be anything. It shows up everywhere. But the default, kind of response is a defensive one, and that's not necessarily, the best position to take. But we'll kind of, we'll dive into that a little bit more. Um, I think whenever these situations kind of happen to us, um, I think we're always trying to figure out why, because it's like it just doesn't feel good. And I think what I've found, at least, throughout the years in all these different contexts, it's not coming from a place of like malice. It's more of a self-protection, self-preservation for like the person on the other side. And I think because this topic, this situation shows up just kind of everywhere often, is it's the easiest. It's the like the tidiest, like, so to speak. It's the easiest thing to default to, right? And I think that's just, I think it's a trap. I think that there's a lot of costs that come along with that. You know, you pay a toll on the relationship with that person, and I think it's an interesting it's an interesting thing as to why groups of people tend to default to that quite often. What's the danger of immediately trying to defend yourself when a situation like this comes up? I think that's always an interesting one in the sense that you're kind of creating a net new tax or toll with the other party, because now there's a little bit of like a kerfuffle, and that's not pleasant. I think taking a defensive posture, it has other costs associated to that. And maybe I'll make some other episodes about that too, but like it's just it has a cost on like relationships, and specifically the relationship with that person who shifted the blame onto you. I think, you know, the more if you are to defend yourself, now that person's going to have to then respond kind of in kind, and that creates, you know, a tax and or a toll for on them. And I think as the volley goes back and forth, um, maybe resentment's not the right word. Maybe frustration's a better word. I don't know. Let's just go with frustration. Um, you know, now you have this other problem that you have to contend with, is now frustration's just rising because of the volley. Um, and I think that's a cost that people should really consider. Um, so I would just say, you know, keep that in mind. So how do you stay anchored when the story is getting twisted? I think just wholesale, just stay objective, right? Just focus on the objective facts. Stay within, you know, observable reality. Don't succumb to any sort of emotional like response, because if you do that, the volley that I just mentioned, right? Like that's the consequence of it, and that is not good. That leads to a whole other slew of problems, and yeah, it's a whole other episode that I'll cover, you know, sometime. But you know, your goal should never really be to try to win the narrative, because that's not the point, right? You're you're working with this person, whoever it is, um, towards a common goal, right? So I think it's really important that that both parties, or just all parties in general, right? Like you keep your eyes on the prize of what it is that you guys are trying to collectively like do. I think anything besides that, you're just there's just cost associated, and it's not worth it at all. And you know, I think that's hard for a lot of people to take. But also that's like the reason why I'm creating this episode is, um, I don't know. I just hope that I don't know. I just hope this episode inspires something, right? So that's always my hope. Just know that, you know, the goal isn't to win the narrative, and just try to stay in your reality like long enough for the truth to rise to the top. But just know that it may not. And again, that's just not the point, right? Just I like to say that, you know, when working with so many different, you know, teams throughout the years, I think again, it's easy for anybody to default to it. I mean, hell, I've been guilty of it. And I think just keep your eyes on the prize and just remember what it is that you as a group are trying to collectively achieve. Okay, so what does it mean to roll with these kinds of punches? I think you don't want to, first off, just like rolling with the punches is not a sign of weakness. It's almost like a sign of respect for the overarching objective, right? I think if pettiness kind of takes over and like the volley of blame goes back and forth, you're kind of just doing a disservice to what it is that you guys are trying to collectively achieve, right? And you can take that and you can put it into like whatever context you want. It could be, a professional thing, it could be a personal thing, like whatever the case is, right? Is just if you spend too much time on, arguing over who was right or wrong, you're you're taking time away from the thing that's larger, that actually counts, that like matters. So I think, I don't know, I guess just try to remember that, right? And it's just, I keep going back to like there's no other way, or there really shouldn't be any other way, because I mean, I'm thinking about it in my head right now. I mean, like the volley could be infinite. It could go on forever. And there are so many costs associated with keeping that going forever. And I don't know, it's interesting. Like now it's making me think about kind of a tangential topic of like, if you're in a leadership position, right? Like you're trying to help lead the charge for a larger group of people. And so if you're in a leadership role and you're stuck in the pettiness, then you're kind of like leaving all these other people that are in your charge high and dry, because the overarching objective still stands, right? And it's generally speaking, the objective is, to have a benefit for everybody else. You can change I'm just speaking generally, right? It's like you're in a leadership role, people are counting on you. That's what I'm saying. People are counting on you. So there is no other way than to really just keep your eyes on the overarching objective. So I don't know. I think that's just something, to keep in mind, that like when you're rolling with these punches, like that's part of the reason why, right? Like you're doing it because there's something larger at play. I think if we were to maybe kind of zoom in a little bit more like more tactically on this, this is a whole other episode. Like, I think it's important that you stay curious instead of like defensive, right? If somebody's making a claim against you, I think, rebuttal it to get some clarity on like how that person arrived at that conclusion. But that's something to be really careful of, because it could very easily become passive aggressive. And I think it is I think it's important to remain neutral, but also at the same time too, like it's not just, this is a whole other like set of episodes, but like, how you say things, what words you choose, the body language associated, like the tone, all of that, it all counts. And, I think it's very interesting when I think back at, just all the instances throughout the years of the blame game, And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a scary thing because you feel like if you just move on and keep your eyes on the prize of the objective, right? That like you didn't get the last word. And so does that make you a guilty person, right? And I think that just in my head right now, and again, I already kind of mentioned this to you all, or you saw the disclaimer on this show. Like I tend to tangent, and I think, man, that just opens up an entirely other set of topics to talk about because, yeah, it's really when you're in those situations, everything counts, and it's really important to remain productive, but also you don't want to get thrown under the bus. And I think, I don't know, it's interesting. I think even just talking through this episode right now is just like spawned maybe 3 others. And I think, yeah, I think just at the end of the day, you just want to choose function over friction, right? And I think anybody in any position, like anybody who's like, let's just say is like passing judgment on the situation, I think would appreciate that, right? I think at the end of the day, people just want to know that, the larger objectives, that they're moving forward, right? I think it's just important that I almost think that there's like a level of kindness that needs to be in play where like if that person shifts the blame, right? I think it's important to I think it's important to just respond with kindness in such a way, right? Kindness and understanding, but you also, you don't want to get thrown under the bus and, completely blamed for a situation. So I don't know. There's kind of an art to the whole thing, really, which maybe I'll just expand on that in other episodes. But I think just generally speaking, wholesale, like just keep your eyes on the overarching objective. How do you end these moments without resentment? I think that I think just understanding what the nature is of like the blame game, so to speak, and just how easy it is to like default to it, I think is important. I think it's important to understand, I don't know, it's kind of a defense mechanism. We're all guilty of it. Like I'm almost 100% positive that everybody who's watching this, and myself included, we've been like guilty of this at some point or another. I think it really shows itself in really high stakes environments where things are just really complicated and unclear, and it's tough too because like it's like a kind of a, to a degree, I would label it as a toxic thing or like a contagion. I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that when you see other people do it around you, there's almost it almost feels like you should be doing the same thing, and that's really wrong. I hope, maybe this episode kind of, I just hope I was able to like help people visualize the volley between the two parties and then think about the emotional tax that like when somebody throws something over to you, you have to defend against that. That's a tax. Throw it back. They have to like defend that. That's a tax. You do that forever, right? It's exhausting. And then all of a sudden cooperation is just gone. Yeah, I don't know. Like how do you end these moments without resentment? I think it's just understanding that I think it's just a human thing, and I think it's just having a level of like empathy for that, for having a level of like empathy for the other person, right? And I think I don't know. I think like the answer, like all I'm thinking about right now is that it's just like, and maybe I need to expand on it maybe in a later episode, but it's just like the volley just is forever and it doesn't end and it just fosters resentment. And so looking at it from like a systems perspective, it's like, okay, let's not do that option. What if we go this route, right? And the other route that I'm looking at, and I mean, I am just looking at it like a binary thing, but like the goal would be, or the idea would be to keep your eyes on the overarching goal. But I think that like to a degree, I think that there's a level of conflict resolution. I mean, it is. So, I mean, it is in and of its very like nature. In conflict resolution, there's an art to it. You know, I think in as much as like let's just say like in a professional sense, you could have like written like documentation processes and whatnot, you know, like racing models and stuff, but it's like I don't know. It's just it's an art form because it's human beings, right? Like we can't. It's just this is something I'm definitely going to cover in some other episodes, but like just because like something's like written down as like a rule does not mean that everyone's going to follow it. I just mean that in like a generality, right? And I think that there's an art form to getting people to understand that they're breaking a rule and that they understand what the consequence of it is, or understanding like the concept of like fairness. I don't know. I think that this topic just branches out to a whole lot of other ones. And I just think generally, like in the most general sense, it's just important to stay rooted in observable reality and just facts while keeping the overarching objective in mind. I think that's kind of like the best antidote to the blame game. But of course, there's nuances associated with that, and I'm just coming to the realization now that I'm definitely going to unpack a lot of those other things in future episodes. But yeah, I don't know. I just want to say it one last time, guys. Like the volley can go on forever, and just remember the cost associated with that. So, yeah. What's the takeaway of this episode? I think some takeaways from this episode is the blame game, so to speak. It can happen anytime and anywhere. It's always an option. And I think when thinking about this episode, it kind of baffled me where it was just like, wow, it's always an option. There's never, I can't think of any situation where one's words could not be twisted in some way and thrown like back at them. But even then, so that person can then twist that and then throw that back, and it turns into like the volley that we've been talking about. And I think key takeaway on this is just know that that's always an option for all parties at all times, and it should never be used. It doesn't do any good to anybody. And I don't know, I guess I'm just kind of saying this from like a leadership position, is that if you're in a leadership role and that kind of comes across your desk, so to speak, do not play into it. I think that's a whole other like set of episodes to go into, but that's kind of what I was mentioning at the beginning or somewhere within this episode, is like there's a level of, it's like a contagion, like people can catch it, it's like a virus. And yeah, just watch out for that. I think, yeah, it's just just watch out for it. I think by now in this episode we've already kind of established how bad this kind of like mechanism is, and I hope that in the spirit of the podcast and frameworks, I kind of hope that some of the things that I outlined inspired you guys when if and when you come across a situation like this. I think another key takeaway would be I guess you could call it patience, right? I think when events like this occur, or when situations like this arise, it takes a lot of patience. I guess courage to a certain degree. Courage sounds like a really extreme word, but like to stay grounded in observable reality, right? Not to default to emotion. I think it's just a key takeaway of this episode is just make sure to be patient. And I hope that kind of talking through some of the stuff and like understanding, at least from my perspective, right? Like where these things are coming from and kind of like the nature of them. I don't know. I'm a big fan of the concept of like name it and claim it. And I just, now that we kind of understand, the inner workings of the blame game, I hope that it inspires you to be more patient, if and when these situations arise. I think I'd like to think like the optimistic part of me would like to think that like the truth will always prevail. And I think assuming that what one is trying to do is of good, and there's a reason why certain actions were taken or not taken, that those would eventually come to light. So I think there's the optimistic side of me that wants to tell you people who are watching this that it's possible that happens, and that's great. It's also, I would go as far as to say, a lot more likely that it doesn't happen, and I think that that's also okay. I think, I don't know. I think it just, sorry, for context, like 3 other episodes just popped in my head where it's like, it's almost like when you look at any one of the situations, like pick any example of the blame game, right? Like you're trying, even if the example that you kind of pointed out could be like a smaller, like petty one, I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's at least 2 parties trying to get something collectively done, right? And that could be something that's very like meaningful or something trivial, but it is also just a cooperative effort in its very nature. And I think it's important to remember that it is a cooperative effort, whatever the thing is. And so people are invested in it, even if it is just the 2 parties. And nobody ever wants things to go wrong. And I think it's just a human factor, a human thing for us to default to this blame game when things go sideways. And I think it's just really important for really everybody, right? If you look at this from like an organizational effectiveness standpoint, that the managers, the directors, the VPs, the C-suite, right? they all understand the nature of the blame game, the fact that it's always an option, and that it's highly, I think contagious would be the right word. Like it can spread like a plague. Like it's not good. That's what it's highly infectious. What's the word I'm looking for, Chris? Come on now. You understand what I'm trying to say. Like it can spread like the plague. And God, just imagine that. Like I'm just in my head right now. I'm just like think about the volley between two people going on for a while. Take that and then multiply it, but then it could be volleys against multiple people, and all of a sudden you have this like insane spider web of just blame. And man, this really does spawn a lot of other thoughts, because it's just important to remember what the group is collectively trying to achieve, right? And I think it's important, and I'll have other episodes about the concepts of like hierarchy, right? And I've seen it everywhere. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I think it's what happens when groups of people are trying to like pursue a common goal, is that this type of behavior kind of ensues. And more often than not, folks in a leadership role are just as guilty of it, right? So the behavior just passes through. There's nothing insulating it. And if you look at that, and I'm just looking at it from like a diagram perspective, like in my head, where it's just like, whoa, that's wild. That's a lot of unnecessary finger pointing, I guess. I don't even really know how to articulate that, but it's just a lot. But and then on the flip side of that, I'm just looking at what the antidote is. And the antidote would just be, okay, like what are these groups of people collectively trying to achieve? Okay, I think there needs to be like a level of grace with the people, on the other side, like the person that's throwing the ball at you or the thing at you that you have to like block, whatever analogy you want to use. You get what I'm trying to say. But also you kind of need to remain steadfast in your position, but then also productive. Like, and I guess that's what I'm kind of saying. Like, it's kind of an art form, right? And it's I don't know. It's interesting. I think I just realized I need to definitely do a follow-up episode on this particular topic, because there's so many nuances associated with it. But just broad strokes, generally speaking, the blame game is happening between two parties, and it's happening because of some sort of misunderstanding towards a collective goal, even if it is just between two people, right? It's the cooperative effort towards something larger, not like existentially larger. I just mean like one up from the party of two. And if that goal is not reached, is there a sense of blame to go towards one of those people? So in order to mitigate that, is it just throwing the other person to the wolves, so to speak? I don't know. I think this is a really weird way to end this episode, where I'm just like, wow, okay, there's definitely a few more episodes in here. So yeah, thanks for hanging with me as I kind of went through all of those thoughts in real time. But yeah, I hope you guys gleaned something from this. Yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, just thanks for taking the time to hear me think through all of this. I was going to take some time to like recap the key takeaways again, but I just realized I think that there's a lot more here than I'm giving credit to. So, definitely going to explore this on future episodes. Let's find an off ramp for this episode, since you guys just had to suffer that crazy stream of consciousness just now. Just first off, just thanks again for tuning in to another episode. If this is your first episode, thank you for joining. I think if you're curious about what this podcast is all about, definitely check out the first episode. I kind of outline what this whole thing is all about. So yeah, I don't know. I think just thanks for taking the time to watch. I hope some of this stuff was inspiring. This particular topic I feel like is very. I've already mentioned it. It's nuanced, and I'm genuinely curious about what you guys' thoughts are. So please feel free to leave them in the comments. Yeah, I don't know, guys. Had a lot of fun with this one, and I don't know. Let's just end it here. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you, everybody.